Hello, this is Jürgen with ACT Computers. Today another episode of Tech Talk, here with my technician, Brian. Yes, how are you? Anyway, today we'll be talking about something quite exciting, and we've been into this business for a little bit now, and that is 3D printing, right? 3D printing. And today we will be showing off the newest products and why we chose to use 3D printing in our business and starting to use it more and more. And we're also showing off quite a new technology. So Brian, nice to come with me, and we're having a nice good show here. What is this? What is that thing?
This is the BAMBU LAB X1 CARBON. It's one of their newer 3D printers that they have that we've essentially been able to purchase and test out. We've ran through it with quite a few of our own prints, and it does have a lot of features that a lot of other 3D printers haven't normally had, and a lot of
yeah, it's definitely quite something. It's if you think about it, so we've been we had this printer for about, let's say, a month now. I would say a little over a month, and we started using 3D printers about 2 years ago at ACT Computers, mainly just to test them out. And 3D printing, as we know, is a technology that is really still emerging, but it's gotten out to the point where you can actually purchase one of these printers and print professionally at your home or at your business. So this printer, how much was this printer?
Roughly around $1,500.
So $1,500 for this printer right here, which we will be reselling to in our shop soon. And this is a kind of printer that is a production grade printer. So compared to if you are into 3D printing and you've seen them, they are basically the beginner ones, which is like the Ender 3 and the regular printers, which are good printers, but they are basically meant for the hobbyist, and they require a lot of adjustments, a lot of tinkering. So they basically come in a kit. You have to put it together, right? Which takes
quite a bit of time.
Quite a bit of time. So it takes about 3 hours to build. So it almost looks like an open cage. Everything is open, nothing is contained inside the unit, and it has a lot of manual adjustments and tinkering to do. So, I mean, when we used to print something, it used to take hours, sometimes days, and you constantly have to basically babysit this job to make sure it doesn't go wrong.
Yep.
Because what happens if it goes wrong, right?
It basically can ruin the entire print, and you would have to pretty much have to start from scratch.
So it's quite funny. Sometimes you see there is like a print doesn't work, for example. You get there in the morning and you would see a big giant salad of filament, these supplies, and a little bit of your print. You're like, oh my god, I always wasted my entire supply, and it printed all this junk overnight, and it's useless, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
So the nice thing about this printer, for example, is, and this is how far it's come, is it has a built-in webcam interface. And you can look at it online through the cloud-based app that they have, and it will tell you, it even sent you a message saying there's something wrong with this printer, that you need to check up on it. So that is quite cool. I mean, it is really amazing what these things have come to. So this particular one, how many colors does this one print right now?
Currently I only have two spools of color for the printer itself, but this one in particular can go up to 4. But there are kits that you can purchase to where you can actually hook up to 4 of these, so you'll be able to have roughly 16 different types of colors that you can print with.
Right.
Essentially.
So this thing you see on top here is just basically a supply hopper that sits on top of it. So this unit has all the different, if you can actually open this up for the guests on top, sure. You can see this one actually has all the filament spools in it, and it feeds it through a tube inside the printer. And quite amazing, when it prints and it has to change colors, it retracts it, right?
It it basically cuts off the filament
The
first,
previous one.
and then it'll be able to pull back the rest of the filament to where it can then swap in the new filament that it needs.
That's quite amazing. I mean, all this stuff going on inside with you having to do anything, it just does it.
Other than usually though in the slicer you would have to of course tell what particular color where, but in general, yes, it'll essentially be able to know when to swap during print.
Right. So it's quite amazing, and we've been printing quite a lot at our store, mainly for internal things. So you can see we have something like this, which is a beautiful vase. This on this printer, how long do you think this would take? It's very thin.
For I'd say probably at least an hour and a half. Probably.
Okay, for one like this.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So you can actually put a flower in it. It's really, really nice. And then, you see up here we have a 3D printing stand. That came out really nice. For our own internal things, we print like our keychains and stuff like that for our company, which is really beautiful. It's upside down right now. And this is all production grade, so this does not get ruined by the sun or anything right now.
Part of what the filament that you use, basically, yeah.
Yeah. So
It's
this
completely plastic.
this plastic caddy here that says "Take One" on it is also 3D printed. Came out as right after the second print, and this is actually quite a funny one. This is actually, we might want to have a close up on the camera if we can. It's quite amazing how this printed out. So this printed out in one step, in one piece.
Mostly,
Yeah.
except for the eyes.
This is like a gecko type thing. It's all attached. See how it wiggles. So all these little attachments here and attachment points were printed in one step. So we didn't have to put this together anything. This was like that. So you can print very complex things amazingly. So we're going to show a little bit more on how this actually works technically behind the scenes, because you obviously have to get the data into the printer. So can you pull up the program and see how that works? How you do that? Because you have to first have a design. So you design the file in a 3D program. Like, which one do you use?
Typically what I use is often Blender, which though it's more for finer detailing for certain models. Typically, if we already have the model on hand, then I would typically import it into Blender itself, and I would be able to edit the model throughout, whether it's manipulating the size and shape of certain areas of the model itself.
Right.
And
we'll try to zoom in on this thing right there. This is actually what we have similar to our keychain, right?
Yep.
So we just printed these, for example, to actually put on our car. Believe it or not, this is something that's going to replace our magnets on our company car. We're going to print it very thin, and these are going to get stuck on with double-sided 3M industrial tape to the outside of the car for advertising. So instead of using magnets that you have to replace all the time, or something like a film that you have to replace and gets ruined by the sun, this holds up a lot longer. So this is what that is right now, and you can print this any size you want to, as long as it can fit inside. Right?
Yep.
It's quite amazing. So, funny story. We're doing a lot of experimental printing just to see what we can do. So I just told Brian last week we have a Kia, one of our cars, company cars, where the emblem up front, right? The actual Kia emblem doesn't look that good anymore. So we actually have it parked outside. And so I asked you to print one looking almost like the Ford symbol, and we stuck it on the front of the car, and it looks fantastic. It really does. So we're going to do more.
Yeah.
So a lot of cool things. So how does this work? You have to model this, right? You have to add something to it.
In Blender essentially provides you the various tools to be able to essentially change the object to how
So
how you would need
you
it.
can move this around in the 3D space right
Yep.
now, right, to show the customer. Like you can look at this just like in real life, zoom in on it, and you can move it around. And then let's say you want to change something. Let's say you wanted to say ACT computers, you want to see ACT gaming. Can you just change that writing on there?
That would be a bit more of a little bit of a lengthy
Mhm.
process, but
Yeah.
typically, since I already have the model in hand, what I would have to do is go into a different mode, a edit mode essentially, and what that does is that
Wow, zoom in a little bit on
yeah.
that so
it
we can see it.
yeah, unfortunately I didn't
There we go.
figure it that much, but
Yeah, we can see that.
yeah. So essentially, this shows me all of the mesh. Essentially, the in
The actual layers on how
Mhm.
it's created, right? The vectors, right?
yeah,
Mhm.
and what essentially I would be able to do is go through and I would have to essentially delete all of
Mhm.
the vectors, especially for the text underneath computers.
Right.
Then once that is completely cleared out,
Mhm.
I can then swap over to another mode and back to object mode, and I would be able to add in my own text
Mhm.
to where I can type in the
Right.
text I want, and then I would just have to go through the process of just adding it back to the model.
Right. So, you have another model saved on you we can look into?
Unfortunately,
Just this one.
Yeah, unfortunately for today.
Yeah, this is the only one we
only
have.
one I have.
Anyway, so this is now created in this 3D modeling program. So this is Blender, which is Blender a free program, or do you have to buy it?
Blender itself is actually free.
Free, wonderful program. And Blender is actually quite used in the industry for a lot of different things, like video production and a lot of different things. But it's a really amazing program, and I really recommend for people who get into this to learn Blender. It's amazing what you can do with this. So, how do you now get this? Once you have designed this, how do you get this to go to the printer?
So once I am basically completely satisfied with everything that I've essentially modeled out,
Mhm.
I can then export the file to a .stl,
Mhm.
which basically what it does is it only cuts out everything except for the mesh data,
Mhm.
so that then once I bring it up in Bamboo's own slicer, which
Okay.
they also provide on their website,
Mhm.
I can then open up
Amazing.
the model into the program itself.
So this is the program that comes with the 3D printer from Carbon,
Yep.
from Bamboo Labs, which we're very thankful that they shipped this thing out quickly to us because they're hard to get right now. And this right now basically represents the inside platform where this gets built up.
Yep.
Because we have to kind of explain to our customers a little more how 3D printing works. It's basically printing from the bottom up, right?
Yep.
So you're printing layer by layer. So it puts down plastic material, other materials too, very hot, and layer by layer, and it builds it up slower, slower, slower. And it takes a long time, but this is a pretty quick printer for what it does. And it's very precise, so you can print on really, really precise things. And when this comes out, you can hardly tell sometimes it's printed on a printer with its different layers.
Mm.
So right now we have the build plate, so we can actually, if you want to print more than one, you can duplicate that and put as many as you want on one to save time. So normally when we print this, how many do we print at a time?
Well, given the size of this, I can pretty much almost fit up to 15 of these on a single
one plate, right?
And really that for mass producing these, it's pretty easy actually.
Right, and you have to think about the applications of this. Like we can use this to print adapters for hard drives. We print this to make mounts for switches, for networking gear, for everything we use in our business. But also in the wide, range of applications in the industry. So you can see 3D printers now. Obviously, they came from the automotive industry. They're printing all kinds of parts with them. So in the future, instead of having like a giant warehouse full of parts that might never get sold, imagine you have these printers sitting there, bigger ones, commercial ones, that print out those objects, and this is already happening. So this is really cool. Also about other industries, medical, for example, they are using 3D printers to print implants, like knee replacements and stuff like that, of having an exact duplicate of what you used to have as a knee bone and replace it. It's amazing. So how do you get this to print now? You send a command, or what do you do?
So I essentially this wasn't quite this color at first. I did have to go through and essentially paint it, and there's essentially a coloring mode where you can go through and paint all around the object itself, to basically be able to tell the printer which colors to essentially use.
Right. So you have to tell the printer what colors to put where, and then it also kind of figures out how to build this, right? How to assemble it on its own, right?
Yep.
So you don't have to be, spending hours on this. You can just send it off, and the software and the printer figures out how to actually print it properly.
Well, and of course there are other options throughout here.
Right.
For example, in one instance that we might often face with doing 3D printers is that sometimes with the issue with printing from the bottom up, you might often run into sharp angles that might
like you need sometimes you have to, it's printing what's called a support structure, right?
Yep.
So basically what that is that it prints out extra material to support the build so that it doesn't fall down from the gravity, and then later on you basically just take it off with nail clippers, or you just take it off by hand and you file it down, and that's just there temporarily, right?
Yep.
Right. So let's look back at the screen here. We can show that. And I actually want to show this thing one more time. If we can go to the screen. This is obviously 3D printed also, and you see how I am really amazed how sharp it came out. The edges are smooth. I mean, you can't feel anything, and it even you printed it out with the little stands in the back, so it sits on the table. Wow, amazing. So anyway, let's try printing this. Let's send it to the printer and see what happens.
So
this whole thing works, huh?
Alright, so it's sliced.
So it's sliced.
Right.
And that's actually the printer itself we're talking to right now, right?
Yep,
the
it's
preview?
listed right here.
Uh-huh.
And of course right here you can tell it whether or not other options like doing calibrations beforehand or anything else like that.
So what he's mentioning about calibrations, this is the nice thing about these printers. They take a lot of the work away from you having to figure things out. Because you have to imagine, the built plate, the plate is printing on has to be completely leveled. If that thing is not completely leveled and it's starting to print, it's going to be lopsided and it won't print right? So it measures that with LiDAR, I believe, to measure that exactly it's straight. So, and it did that before we even got started here.
Yep.
So, amazing. Let's try sending it. That's sending it through. You can see the progress bar on the bottom?
Yep.
Wow, that is quite amazing.
Alright, and it took me to the device page of the printer itself. So here you can actually get a live feed from the printer itself.
That's amazing. That's quite amazing. And it also has an app for the phone, right?
Yep.
So I'm pulling it up right now. There's an app on the phone if it loads. So this is something you can look at from home or on the road and telling you, okay, this is what's going on with the printer. You can see the temperature rising right now to bring up the filament because it gets, how hot does this thing get?
Well, for PLA, its default temperature is 220.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty fast when it comes to raising the temperature to whichever it's trying to achieve.
Amazing. So we just printed something that took overnight, and I guess it had some issues with something, and it warned me at night to check up on it. And nothing was wrong, and just stopped the print, and I restarted remotely without having to wait for it. And you can see right here, we also have a login on the actual app to show also a webcam. So just like here on the screen, I can look at this from home and see what's going on. Amazing. Wow. Quite something. So let's, I don't know if we can zoom in a little bit on the printer itself, of what's going on inside. So this is the actual print head right now. What is it doing?
So at first it has to make sure that there is no filament at all whatsoever
Right.
currently in the print head itself.
Right.
So it does a quick purge of filament to make sure that when it's printing with the desired filament that you selected at first.
So it doesn't want to make sure there's nothing stuck in there from the previous job.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
So
Wow. That's amazing.
So it basically goes through and pushes out a little bit of filament to be able to adjust to it.
So it actually just, yep, he's just picking up. Basically, this thing has a little exhaust hole, I would call it, in the back. And this is actually like a piece of filament. It just shot out. Whoops. And this is stuff that's junk. It's just the leftover. So you basically put a little bucket behind it if you don't want to grab it from the floor all the time. And it collects the stuff it doesn't need.
Yep.
So we can actually see now what it's doing, right?
Yep. And there is a helpful feature in the slicer itself to where you can actually adjust exactly how much filament it does go through to every time it wants to purge. So say if you're thinking it's using too much filament to use in the first place to do a purge, you can lower or raise how much you want for it to go through.
Wow, that's amazing.
So,
Well, you definitely say thank you for spending so much time with this machine. Looks like you really, the master of this machine now. You know how this thing works. It's quite amazing. So we can see now. It's I think it's calibrating.
It's doing a bed leveling. So essentially, it's making sure that the plate itself is entirely flat, and it can make its adjustments throughout the entire process. And it has sensors currently underneath the plate, and every time the nozzle goes down and hits the plate itself, it can get a reading as far as that it knows that it's actually hitting the plate, and it can adjust as to comparing to the other points, whether it's too high in one area or too low in another area.
Right. So does it do this process before every print?
That is an option. You can tell it to do it every single time, or you can just tell it to never really ever do it. If you're confident.
If you're confident that the last print came out perfectly, you don't have to do it the next time. So you can really save yourself a lot of time, because that takes a little bit of time to do that, calibration every time. But you can see the head is moving around, and it works pretty much just like an old-fashioned, printer. It's just you're printing from the plate up. In a regular printer, you're printing, from the top down. And remember the old dot matrix printers that just zip, zip, zip all the time. Remember that? Looks like it's about ready to go, right? It's doing something there.
It's almost finished with going through the
calibration.
Print.
So where do you see that? You see that's.
So
it says auto bed leveling right now. So it's actually going through the leveling process, and that's all part of the 32%. It's done. So that's part of the whole process, the whole printing.
And it does factor in that when the slice does happen, it can factor that into the total amount of time it will take for the print itself. So,
okay.
So you would be able to tell that this is included.
Okay. Wow. So right now it's back there, and looks like it's doing some more measuring. This is quite amazing, isn't it? How I can watch this for hours. And what do I do now? Just more purging? Let's go.
It's going through the calibration flow. So it basically prints out a certain pattern on the plate itself. And it does it, and it varies throughout how fast and how slow it tries to push the filament through the print head itself. And it can essentially will take a LiDAR measurement from there, and it can tell from that if whether or not it needs to adjust how fast the filament needs to go through the print head in order to be able to get a consistent print, essentially.
Okay, so it's actually starting to print right now, right? It's actually done leveling the print, the surface.
Yep.
And it's doing a test print right now of what it would lay down. But you don't have to do this every time to print, right? This is just to... So when you transport the printer, for example, this is something you have to do, because we move it over here.
Yeah.
It actually goes through and tests out what it can do, make sure everything's correct. So let's see how it moves over there to the side, and hopefully we'll start printing our logo here. So there we actually see how it's moving the circle, so we can see it's actually going around. We can zoom in on the screen. There we go. You can see it's right now it went around the circle. Now it's already doing the infill, right?
Yep, it's already started on the first layer of the logo itself. So essentially the underside, pretty much of the
printing out from the bottom up. Yep. So right now, and we even have our phone number etched in the bottom, which is quite amazing.
Yeah. Although since this isn't the keychain, this one does not have the phone number.
Right. This is just our logo itself, but it's amazing. So it's actually building it roughly now, one level, and so it's building up one millimeter at a time, or less than millimeter at a time, right?
I believe it's 0.4. So that, and you can adjust that if you want either by giving the print head either larger nozzles or smaller nozzles up to.
Right.
I think the smallest you can do is 0.2, and the largest is basically I believe a 0.8 or pretty much a 1 millimeter nozzle, but those are typically better for really larger prints.
Okay, so they've done that, not so precise. So right now, basically, it perched something, right?
Yep.
And see, right now, this is the part we definitely want to show the audience how fast, once that thing starts, before we have to do all the calibration, once it actually starts going, how quick this thing is. So they can barely see the print head. So right now, it's just really just laying down one layer after another, right?
Yep.
And we're about
7 minutes.
7 minutes. 7 minutes away from printing one. Oh, that's pretty good. Now that's obviously if you want to print more than one at a time, you print as many as you can on one page. So there we have it. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time. Actually, thank you, Brian, for being here with me. This is really amazing technology. Next week we will have a special guest on our show. Her name is Latoya. She runs Miss B's Learning Bees, a learning center for kids, and that'll be quite interesting how she uses technology to help kids with their education. And thank you so much. Jürgen with ACT Computers. Bye bye.